right, welcome back to another episode of That Amazon Ads Podcast. I'm your co-host, Andrew, and today we're going to be diving into a topic talking about should you ever increase your bids on high ACOS keywords? And we have some reasons, and I think you'll be surprised by our answers to this. Like, should you be increasing stuff that's not performing at your targets? We're going to be diving into that, sharing you all the reasons why you should be increasing your bids on high ACOS targets. So stay tuned for that. We're going to be diving into it, but first, Steven, how are you today? What do you got for us?
I'm doing well, Andrew. Right before we hit the record button, we pushed through the biggest update so far to the AdLabs app, now supporting sponsored brands and sponsored display bidding optimizations. So super excited for that, and makes this episode particularly timely because, as you'll see in a few minutes, there are times where on sponsored brands in particular, you want to increase those bids on high ACOS keywords. Even though, I think some people are, I guess I'll be very curious to see the comments on this video because this might be a little bit of a divisive topic, although I think we're here today to say, mathematically speaking, it shouldn't even be controversial. It should just be clear as day, black and white. So hopefully we can accomplish that, explaining why and when you would want to increase bids on high ACOS keywords.
Yeah, we're going to lay out the facts, lay out the math, and show why you would actually want to do this. So if there's no other announcements, I think we could just go ahead and dive right into reason number one why you would want to increase your bids on high ACOS targets. All right, so reason number one that we've written down for why you should increase your ACOS or your bids on high ACOS targets is
why you should increase your ACOS.
Let's back up. You don't necessarily want to increase your ACOS, but let's talk about bids on high ACOS targets. So the first reason that we're going to discuss is really backed by this conversation. And Steven, you actually brought this up and said it this way, and I'm going to steal it from you. But you said the bid is not necessarily a data point; it's a status. And so the conversation around when you should increase bids on high ACOS targets kind of stems from this conversation around the bid is not actually a data point. We want to actually use the data associated with the keyword to make optimizations, make changes, and inform what our bids should actually be set to. You know, if you just use your bid as a data point, you may log into your account and see that your bids were dropped really low. Let's say you work with an account and the client is like hyper in the weeds on their account and they come in and make changes on your account when you don't want them to, or you have more than one person working on an account making changes that maybe you don't necessarily cross-reference every single change with. Let's say the client went in there and they nuked all the bids on these keywords to like 10 cents or something like that. If your bidding system is using, a plus or minus percentage adjustment based on performance with that, it would look at that keyword and say it's high ACOS, the bid's already 10 cents, it'll classify that target as a high ACOS term, and it'll keep reducing that bid just because it's basing it solely on the ACOS and then moving the bid as based on what that performance is telling us. So you can see how, like, if number one, if that's your method of doing bid optimizations in this scenario, this is kind of a made up scenario that probably doesn't happen like all the time, but it could happen. If you were just basing it off the bid, the current state, the current status of that bid, you wouldn't actually be setting your bids into the right level based on the data associated with that keyword. So the inverse of this and what we do and how we optimize our bids is we use formulas. We use the data that's actually associated with the term to make calculations to figure out what the keyword bid should be. And so even if a client came in, nuked all your bids down to 10 cents, and we ran the optimizer on this account, we would find, and the calculations would run based on the data associated with it and calculate the bid based on that, as opposed to the status, which is much more relevant to the actual keyword itself. We're going to get more dialed in there. And regardless of whether somebody's in there making changes without our permission, without our authority, we still use those formulaic mathematical calculations in order to decide what the bid should be. So you kind of eliminate that risk of bids being manually adjusted and then having to go through this long iterative process, increasing bids by a certain percent, or you run into these issues where it could make the wrong move if everything's based on, current bid and just plus or minus percentage points. So that's one scenario where, the bid was dropped to 10 cents. we ran the revenue per click calculation based on the data and actually found that, hey, the keyword bid actually needs to be, $1 or whatever, based on the data that it's showing us. So there's a lot of like reasons, things that could go wrong, where if you're using plus or minus percentage, you're gonna have to go through this long process of trying to get those bids back up to where they're getting visibility, and you may lose a lot of visibility in that process. So that's number one. What else you got, Steve?
Yeah, I just realized we probably should have said at the very beginning, because I think lists are always helpful for people to like kind of start visualizing and making mental organization. We have 3 mathematical reasons for why you would want to increase bids on high ACOS keywords. And then we have a 4th reason, which is more about conceptual marketing strategy, not so much a mathematical bidding formula. But yeah, that first reason, that is a great point, which I'll try to summarize a couple of the things you said just to help people really internalize it. But I do think that's a big important caveat, is that the bid is not a data point, it is a status. And sometimes I like to give people this example. Let's say you're looking at a keyword where for the last 30 days, the ACOS was 30%. Sorry, the ACOS was 80%. I was seeing 80. I don't know how 30 came out of my mouth. Yeah. Your target's 30%. The keyword's ACOS was 80% for the last 30 days. And currently the bid is at $1. And let's just say you jump in there and you change the bid to 5 cents. Now what's the ACOS for the last 30 days? Andrew?
It's going to be the same.
It's going to be the same. Nothing changed. When you change the bid, the ACOS is the historical ACOS, the historical CPCs are all the same. And so in Andrew's example, if the user, if you or if the client or if anybody went in and changed that bid, that is not a reflection of what the bid was at historically. The bid is just the current status. And so if Andrew jumped on one of my accounts, set all my bids to 5 cents, and now I'm going in there saying I'm going to be reducing bids on high ACOS keywords, that's a bad idea to be reducing after they've already been reduced like crazy. So obviously you're not going to have these extreme scenarios where Andrew's going into your accounts, reducing all your bids to 5 cents. But if you are ever making major adjustments to your bids, you will see this a lot, where if you might have already made some keyword bid, you might have already slashed the bid in half. And then when you check back in the next day or a week later, historically, you're still looking back beyond the time frame of when that bid adjustment was made, and you're still pulling in some higher ACOS, higher CPCs data sets. Now, that doesn't mean you should only ever use a time frame since the last bid optimization, because that might be what some people think is like, okay, well then if I made all these adjustments on Monday, I shouldn't include any data for the previous time periods before that last bid adjustment. You don't have to do that. You don't have to like pick super small time frames to account for every individual adjustment. We have other episodes where we talk about more in detail about how to calculate these bids, as well as how to pick these date ranges. But that is the primary point there, is that sometimes these manual adjustments where these bids have been decreased, it was actually an overcorrection and it pulled those bids down below where they need to be. And for you to further reduce them just because the ACOS is high when you're looking at a certain time period would be a mistake. And so instead, what we should be doing is calculating what the bids should be for that time period. And so hopefully that makes sense. If not, leave a comment, leave some questions. We'll be happy to respond. And let's jump into the second reason, unless you've got anything to add, Andrew.
No, I think so that led us right into number 2.
Perfect. So let's dive into reason number 2. So reason number 2 for why you may want to increase bids on high ACOS keywords is that the keyword has improved performance since the last bidding adjustment. And this is probably what I experience most frequently in terms of when I'm making bidding adjustments and I'm optimizing my high ACOS keywords, and I'm seeing that my bids are actually going up. And it's because the conversion rate has improved. So maybe previously, when you were last running the bid optimization, let's just say for simplicity, let's say you're looking at a last 30 days time frame. And it's the start of the month, you're looking at the last 30 days, you put through some adjustments, you lower a bunch of keyword bids because that's how the math just came out, and you've reduced those bids. 1 week later, you're looking at the same last 30 days, not the same last 30 days, you're doing 30 days again, including the most recent 7 days. So, your whole time period shifted forward 7 days, but it's still a total of 30 days in that look back window. And when you run it again, perhaps previously that keyword had like a 5% conversion rate, but now with the new week of data, since you put through some adjustments, maybe there were your product had some deals going on it, or products that came back in stock for that ad group, who knows? Now the conversion rate is up to 8%. And so it might still have a high ACOS for the last 30 days, but it has improved. Maybe the ACOS has come down from 80% to 40%. So ACOS is getting better. Or maybe those conversion rates have improved from, like the example I gave was it went from 5% to 8%. And so even though the ACOS is still high, it's better than the last adjustment. So maybe before your bids had brought your calculations had brought your bids down to like 25 cents, but now we're bringing them up to something like 50 cents. And so this is actually something that I see a lot of the time. One thing that will be important to note is if this is a sponsored product campaign, if you're ever seeing that your bids are being increased, whether because of the formulas that we've taught you guys on previous episodes, or because you're in Ad Labs optimizing for a sponsored product campaign, you should always, always, always see that if your bids are increasing on high ACOS keywords, the new bid, the new value that's been calculated, will still be lower than the historical CPC, which caused that high ACOS. And so to kind of give that example is maybe if you're looking at the last 30 days, the CPC on this keyword was $1. And at $1 CPC, this keyword was high ACOS. That was causing some grief. And we're now raising the bid from 25 cents maybe to 50 cents. So we're doubling the bid. And that can catch a lot of people off guard. Like, how come we're doubling the bid on a high ACOS keyword going from 25 cents to 50 cents? Well, if you look at the historical CPC, the issue with the high ACOS was when the CPC was coming in at $1. We are still below that historical CPC. And the main thing here is that 25 cents is actually underbidding what we truly can afford, given this keyword's revenue per click, the conversion rates, things like that. Do you think that makes sense, Andrew?
Yeah. So it sounds like dependent on what date range you're looking at, what time frame you're looking at, when changes were made, you got to be able to kind of split out and see kind of how performance is changing since your last optimizations. And then it sounds like you're still looking at that overall view, the aggregated view of the full time frame, potentially not necessarily just looking at the time frame between the last optimization and now. You can still include that, and then you get kind of an average of the overall performance of both, when your CPCs were here versus when your CPCs were here, and then you're kind of finding that middle ground to help still push in and grab more visibility, more sales, and things like that. Still within, like you mentioned, below your historical CPC where you were getting that 80% ACOS, but it's still below that. So I think that makes sense. And then, as far as like when you're running you see bids increasing using these formulas, always good to check that CPC and see if that's still lower, which also I think kind of ties into the next thing, but I won't jump too far ahead. But I think that makes sense. So always good to just check that as a good gauge for if you think that things are being increased that shouldn't be, checking that CPC, kind of where that's going to net out after all these adjustments and things like that. So,
And I'm sure people are wondering, why is that only for sponsored products? And also I think technically you could say that applies for sponsored display too, where the new bid should always still be less. So even if you're increasing bids on a high ACOS keyword, it should still be less than the historical CPC. And that's the important thing to keep in mind, that even though you're raising the bid, you're only raising it from like the current bid status, which the current bid is, I guess, just the wrong bid given the data for that period. And how did you get to that wrong bid? Either, like we said in reason number 1, you calculated it wrong because of you or some software or whatever was over-correcting, over-adjusting, getting the math wrong, and basically putting the bid too low. And so when you run the RPC formula for high ACOS keywords, it might end up that what you can afford and what the proper bid should be is actually above what it's currently at. Or reason number 2, the keyword itself has improved its performance since then, and so we actually can raise that bid and be spending a bit more since the last adjustment. But in either of those scenarios, the bid should still be less than the historical CPC, which is the reason why that keyword was high ACOS. And that applies for sponsored products and I believe also sponsored display. It does not apply to sponsored brands because in sponsored brands, you could potentially have bids be set to higher than the historical CPC, even though they're high ACOS. And that would come down to one of the awkward idiosyncrasies with sponsored brands placements. And so with that, let's dive into reason number 3 of why you might want to increase bids on high ACOS keywords.
Okay, so reason number 3, why you would want to increase bids on high ACOS targets is you got to factor in a super important aspect of this, which is placement adjustments. And you were kind of alluding to it with sponsored brands and how there's differences in how those placement adjustments are implemented between sponsored products and sponsored brands. We have some differentiation there. But the main kind of takeaway here when it comes to placements is that you can't just look at your bid or your base bid. You have to also factor in all the other settings that are available to you within the campaign. So you'd need to factor in, number 1, your campaign bidding strategy. So are you using dynamic down only, dynamic up and down? You have to kind of factor that in because that could have an influence on where your actual bid or your max effective bid actually nets out to. So you have to kind of take those into account. But then, the more importantly, placement adjustments. So do you have increases for top of search? Do you have increases for rest of search? Those types of things. They're all going to factor into where this net max CPC ends up getting you to. So sometimes what can happen is like maybe placement performance changed across top of search, rest of search, and product pages, where maybe top of search stopped being as high converting for this period, and you had to reduce some of those bid adjustments there. But when we're thinking about placement adjustments in tandem, in conjunction with our bids, we have to kind of factor all of those calculations together. So your base bid's $1, your top of search is 100%, your max effective bid is going to be $2. So whenever thinking about this, if your placement adjustments came down, you may see that like your bids go up to offset that drop in placement modification, but we still want to maintain that visibility at top of search. We need to increase those base bids if our top of search multipliers are coming down. Does that make sense, Steven?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. So you guys have probably seen our episodes where we talk about how to calculate the placement adjustments for specific campaign placements for sponsored products. We owe you guys a video on sponsored brands, and I'm planning on making one shortly, so be on the lookout for that. But one thing that you should be doing is when you are increasing for top of search by a certain percentage, because we can't go negative on other placements, like let's just say product pages is the worst performing placement, we can't go negative. Amazon doesn't let us apply a negative bidding adjustment for that campaign placement. So what we have to do, our workaround, is we have to globally, let's just say we figure out that product pages is worth 50% less, but we can't actually decrease that by 50%. What we instead do is we decrease all of the keyword bids in that campaign by 50%. And that is our roundabout way of reducing the CPCs on product pages. We then just have to make sure that we increase for rest and increase for top of search. So that's how we do that. I don't want to rehash that placement episode too much since it's already out there. But all that to be said, when you are calculating, if you're calculating both these placement adjustments and both these keyword bids kind of simultaneously, which you should be doing because at the end of the day, it is your keyword bid times any multipliers, modifiers on it that create one CPC. So we don't really think that you can optimize one without optimizing the other. It doesn't make sense to just go in there and just increase your campaign top of search by 100% without making any adjustments to your keyword bids, and vice versa. It doesn't really make sense to move keyword bids around without counterbalancing what's going on in those top of search placements. So, for example, if you reduce the bid on a high ACOS keyword and and you don't touch top of search, you could just lose only the top of search placements and just isolate that keyword to the worst performing placements. So you definitely want to be doing both simultaneously. And for that very reason, there may be some times where, like in the previous example, I said product pages is performing 50% worse. So you're down bidding all of those keyword bids by 50% to kind of try to pull that down. And then within, the last adjustment that you've made and this most current one, perhaps product pages is instead of performing 50% worse, it's only performing 25% worse. And so that keyword bid, maybe the conversion rates on that keyword didn't change at all, but because product pages is doing better, you don't have to downbid it as much. And so removing that downbidding component from minus 50 to only minus 25, when you're applying that to your final keyword bid, that could cause that keyword bid to rise. So that's probably a bit confusing for some people. I think it makes a lot more sense in the masterclass. If you're in the masterclass, we go into a lot of detail on how to actually adjust for those placement modifiers on those keyword bids. That's kind of one of the few things I think we won't ever get a chance to dive into in full detail on the podcast. But you may be seeing those happening if you know how to do these, if you've been applying these. That's another reason why you might be seeing your actual, at the end of the day, the keyword bid calculation is actually increasing the bid compared to where it was at, despite the high ACOS, and it could be because of those placement adjustments that are happening. Andrew, do you think that makes sense? Do you think I missed anything there before I talk a bit more on the sponsored brands topic?
No, I was just getting ready to say the only thing we're missing is sponsored brands and how that's just a little different than sponsored products. So yeah, let's have you go through that one.
Yeah, so for sponsored brands, the issue is that because we can't, sponsored brands doesn't allow us to increase bids for top of search. Instead, they only allow us to increase or decrease for placements not top of search. Now, let's just pause to just appreciate how inconsistent that is of Amazon.
Beautiful.
Nowhere do they ever allow us to decrease bids, whether it's on sponsored products, you for placements, you can only increase, you can't decrease. If it's for day parting, you can only increase, you can't decrease. But then when it comes to sponsored brands, finally they let us decrease or increase. But then they say for placements not top of search. Now, I'm not sure who would ever want to be increasing their bids for placements not top of search. But I guess if for whatever reason
they wanted to give you that option.
They wanted to, Amazon wanted to make sure. I wonder how many of you they're hoping they can trick. Just like, you didn't read the fine print. Sorry, we charged you $3 for placements at the bottom of the page. But because for sponsored brands, we are typically going to be decreasing our bids for placements not top of search, that basically then means, contra to what we do for sponsored products, where we apply a global decrease on all of those keywords in order to kind of downbid all of like the worst performing placements. With sponsored brands, we have to apply a global increase on all the keyword bids to create that workaround to kind of bypass our inability to increase for top of search specifically. What we're going to have to do is we're going to have to increase all those keyword bids. So let's just say top of search is worth 50% more. You're going to have to increase all those keyword bids by an additional 50%, and then say decrease for those non-top of search placements to appropriately segment out the bidding and the CPCs so that you're hitting the right CPC at every placement, as well as your target ACOS. So you may see that for sponsored brands where you have a super high ACOS keyword, and when you run the formulas we've shown you guys, you actually end up raising the bid on this high ACOS keyword. And it could be that because most of that underperforming traffic was coming from non-top of search placements, but top of search is still doing extremely well. And so we're actually raising the bid on that keyword to win those additional top of search placements where the ACOS is good. But then we are applying at the campaign settings level, we are applying that decrease. Maybe it's going down to like minus 70% or minus 80%, just a real big decrease on those non-top of search placements. And so that's just something else to keep in mind. So you might see those keyword bids, with high ACOS raising, but fear not, those are being targeted at top of search, and we're appropriately downbidding the non-top of searches where the conversion rates and the ACOS were really the problem.
So the difference would be that we basically have to treat top of search as our base bid for our keywords within sponsored brands. And it's a little bit different than how we do it with sponsored products, where we're applying that campaign placement modification decrease. Whereas with these, we're setting for top of search, and then we apply those placement decreases to help eliminate the spend on those normally worst performing placements at rest of search product pages for sponsored brands. So yeah, Yeah, definitely a little bit of a nuance there, but in general, still the same kind of like conceptual idea. We're trying to, push spend into those placements where we drive the highest conversions, where we're driving volume at targets, and we're able to manipulate the placements just slightly differently in sponsored brands, but still conceptually the same idea, I think.
Yep. You want to hear something else that's funny, just kind of random?
Yeah, let's go.
On
I love
sponsored
it.
brand on sponsored brand videos, if you go to the campaign settings, and you'll still see the ability to adjust those bid optimizations, whether you're wanting to decrease for not top of search or whatever. And then there's some
Mhm.
text that just says, the text, I forget exactly what the text says, but something along the lines of, "Hey, you can change these settings for sponsored brand videos, but they're not going to do anything. Like, we're not going to apply them."
Huh.
That's what Amazon says.
Interesting.
I know. So you'd think they would just remove the option to adjust placement settings for sponsored brand videos campaigns, but instead
Yeah.
they give you the option to adjust those placements and just apply some text that says it's not, there's no functionality actually behind this button.
Interesting. That's good to know. And that's good to know. I was just launching a bunch of video ads last week, so
Were you
and they were
applying
and the client.
adjustments for placements?
I don't think I did initially upon setting it up, but good to know that that doesn't really work because I mean a lot of clients have probably been focused, and a lot of brands have been focused on getting those top of search video ads running. Those have
Yeah.
shown a lot higher click through rates and engagement, but um, yeah, good to know that how we have to kind of treat those things. But hmm, good to know.
Yeah, fun fact. And okay, so let's just briefly kind of review the first three reasons for why mathematically you may want to actually increase bids for those high ACOS keywords, and then we're going to jump into one final reason, which is basically not necessarily a mathematical approach for raising bids, but more of a strategic marketing decision. So the first reason is that maybe the bid is just the wrong bid. The current bid is too low. And so when you're running the formulas we've taught you guys, oh, I keep forgetting this little thumbs up thing. The Apple made some adjustment where, like, if you do
You got to
two
turn
thumbs
off your
up,
reactions.
I know that's where the fireworks come on. If you do like
Oh,
a peace sign, I think something else happens. Yeah, a little confetti. Okay, get some balloons going. I do have to turn that setting off, but if you're on YouTube, you know what I'm talking about. If you're listening to this, you're probably confused. But the reason why you might want to make these bid increases on high ACOS keywords is that because, first of all, the bid was just calculated wrong, and you were maybe decreasing, if you were to further decrease the bid on this keyword just because the historical ACOS is high or for whatever date range you're looking at would be incorrect. You have to keep in mind that the bid is a status, not a historical data point. Andrew, number two.
we were talking about how the keyword has performed since the last adjustment. So basically, if previously the performance on the keyword was poor, had a lower conversion rate, made some changes, saw that since then conversion rate has improved, performance has improved, we can potentially raise the bid. Maybe we overcorrected and we can reintroduce a little bit more spend and visibility there.
Yep.
And number three.
The placement adjustments have been changing. You're adapting those as well. Your campaign placement modifiers are, which is basically the variable that you're attaching to each keyword based on the placement performance. Those could be changing as well, loosening up on some keywords. And so in most of these scenarios, though, when you are seeing those increased bids for those keywords, the new higher bid should still be below the historical CPC, which should give you confidence with those bid increases, with the exception of sponsored brands where you're kind of having to overbid on the keyword to try to win those top of search placements. But you should be seeing that you're decreasing on the non-top of search placements for that sponsored brand. Otherwise, you probably do have some math that's incorrect there. You shouldn't have the scenario for sponsored brands in which you are doubling your bid and the new bid is now above the current CPC, and also there's no down bidding for the non-top of search placements. That would be an awkward thing that you shouldn't be seeing happen. So let's dive into the fourth and final reason for why you may want to be raising bids on high ACOS keywords.
All right. So the fourth and final reason that we're going to go over is more related to market dynamics and competitor dynamics on Amazon within certain keywords. So let's say you have a product, you're targeting, let's say, a list of like 5 really, really important keywords to your product. You're winning that top sponsored product placement, and that's driving really good conversion rate, driving strong sales for you. You notice that a competitor starts to come in, they're upbidding, they're being more aggressive in their spend across these keywords, and they start winning placement in those top placements that you were previously owning and is important for your brand to continue to own just for visibility and presence within the market. And usually in this scenario, if a competitor kind of overtakes you in placement, and you see the impact of that on the ad side of things, you may be ACOS agnostic to some of these certain keywords. And this is where, it would make the most sense. If you have a keyword that's like super, super important that you maintain visibility and ranking on, and it's more of just like a strategic decision for the brand and just positioning the product in the right placements and trying to just dominate the sector or the space or the category that you're in, this might be a scenario where the ACOS may be high because it's a really competitive term, maybe not as high a conversion rate term, more broad. And it may make sense for you strategically to position your product at top of search and be focused more so on winning that first placement on the page over your competitor. You want to make sure that they're not winning those placements. And even at the price of a high ACOS, a lower conversion rate, you're willing to spend on that keyword and be willing to spend more to maintain visibility in certain placements. So, regardless of ACOS, your placements within SERPs dropped, and you still want to be focused on winning that placement. This could be another scenario where you increase your bids on high ACOS targets.
Yeah, this was probably the reason that everyone thought we were going to say when they clicked on this episode. They were probably just like, should you increase bids on high ACOS keywords? Yeah, if it's a ranking keyword, do it. If it's a ranking keyword and you're not getting top of search, raise the bid. And that's basically the end of it. So in this scenario, we're not so concerned with hitting the target ACOS, or we're trying to be super profitable. The main goal is winning a certain percentage of top of search impression share, or just total sponsored product impression share, or click share, whatever metric you're using to evaluate performance for this kind of awareness ranking strategy. And yeah, you may be ACOS agnostic, so you're just raising the bids to maintain that certain level of visibility. When you are in those scenarios, it's very important to make sure that you do have enough kind of other keywords that are driving good profits, so that at least at the overall account level, you're still on target. It doesn't make sense to let 90% of your spend go to this one keyword and lose a ton of money on it, and only 10% of your other keywords are profitable. You do want to have a good mix, a good balance between your profitable keywords, which you can think of it as like the additional revenue they're generating, or kind of helping to fund your high ACOS targets that are more focused on ranking. And so it's a little bit of a push and pull and a balance game where you got some keywords that are profitable, others that are not, but they're focused on ranking, and the profitable keywords are supplying that with some funding to put through the sales. So I think that all makes sense. And yeah, that one's, I think, pretty straightforward. Just,
Yeah. I mean, it's really just a different KPI that you're tracking. It's not your KPI is no longer ACOS. It could be search term impression rank, or search term impression share is like your new KPI that you're working on, or just having that nuanced segmentation of your account. Some things are focused more on winning top of search or visibility on certain keywords. Some are more, like you were saying, more profitability focused, that kind of net out to your overall targets when you aggregate all the data across that one product. So yeah, I got nothing else on that one. We saved the worst for last. We gave you the best reasons to raise your ACOS targets in the beginning of the episode. And yeah, I think that's it for this one. You got anything else for us, Steven?
No, sir. Just please, everyone, like and subscribe. We love it when you guys do that. It helps us out. We're at 900 subscribers, almost to 1,000, which would be a massive milestone for us. So please, please, please subscribe. If you are interested in having Ad Labs handle all this math for you so that you don't have to do it yourself, check out that link to Ad Labs in the show notes, as well as the link to our Discord community. If you want to ping us with questions on this topic, on this episode, or on any episode, we're answering all those questions there. And then, of course, the masterclass is finally live, And so you can sign up for that as well if you'd really like to get into the nitty gritty of how to combine your keyword bids with your placement settings, or do some advanced reporting, bulk operations, screen shares. All of it's in there. It's quite
Pretty much anything.
pretty much everything. And we're continuing to add to it. So this week on my schedule is to put together the video for sponsored brands on adjusting placements for those. That was going to be a masterclass exclusive piece of content. We may leak it to the YouTube channel for free, as we'll be leaking a couple of special videos. So otherwise, I got nothing for you guys. No other, I guess, things to say. So, Andrew, why don't you send us out of here?
Thank you so much for listening to this podcast, everybody. We'll be back next week with another episode teaching you everything you need to know about Amazon ads. And with that, we'll see you next week.
Peace out.